Okay, we'll just get right into it. So, the John Monash Science School entrance exam is a little bit different to your typical selective school entrance exams. So, if you go and prepare for it as if you're preparing for just another selective school exam, you're probably not going to do as well as you think. And I've seen a lot of misinformation online from tutoring companies and different students that have sat the exam supposedly. And they've just been spreading a lot of misinformation about the school and how to actually get in and the topics that you cover. So this video is basically just a giant overview of what to expect in the John Monash entrance exam, as well as what to stay away from, as a couple of tutors and tutor companies are quite malicious in how they market their courses and things. And also just discussing my overall opinions on how you should go about preparing for it as a brief overview. So we'll just get right into it. So who am I and why should you actually listen to me? If you don't know who I am at all, that's fine. My name is Vihanga and I'm a private tutor based in Victoria. I graduated from JMSS into a double degree for aerospace engineering and astrophysics at Monash University. I've been tutoring for the last 5 years, so I have a bunch of tutoring experience. And over those 5 years, I've taught over 200 students, 80 of which were applicants for John Monash Science School. And 71 of those 80 students actually were able to get into John Monash after I tutored them. And also last year, all the students that I interviewed, all the students that I prepared for John Monash were able to get an interview and also admitted. That was around 7 to 8 students, I think. From memory, it was 7 students because one of them stopped going. More credentials for you as well is that I am a lead in a student team at Monash University, and I also do consulting for different teaching agencies and tutoring companies. I develop programs with multiple schools in Victoria and high schools, some very predominant and prestigious ones throughout the state. And I've also collaborated with some of the top universities in Victoria to create programs and events for them. And I've also created a program that runs in JMSS as well. And there's more on the way. So I have a lot of experience creating and working with different high schools, especially John Monash. So here's some of my students that actually were able to get an interview and also pass the exam and pass the interview. So just a couple of them, you can pause and have a look at them if you feel like it. But let's just quickly go over what the JMSS entrance exam is now that you know that I kind of sort of know what I'm talking about. So we're going to discuss the structure and the things that separate it from other selective entry schools, as well as some of the misinformation that you see online. So most tutoring companies are really, really bad because they say, oh, we know exactly what John Monash is looking for. And we know that our school has, or our tutoring college or whatever has 100% entrance acceptance rate or whatever. If you hear a tutor company say any of these kind of big issue things, my best bet is to, and my advice for you is to just run, because most likely they're just after your money and they're not actually going to be helping out your students. Also, don't trust tutoring companies that say, oh yeah, we have 80 of our kids got in last year when they tutored 1,000 kids, right? So their percentage ratio is very skewed. So don't trust a bunch of tutoring companies. Try and ask yourself a lot of questions and see if it makes sense for you. Usually, if you ask a question and it doesn't make sense for you, most likely the tutoring company that you're under is not going to be the most reputable and probably is just after your money. So some of the common issues that I see with a bunch of different tutoring agencies and companies is, oh, we know the exact questions that'll appear on the JMSS exam. No, no one does, and I'll prove that to you later from literally what the school says. The JMS's exam changes every single year, so no one really knows what the questions are going to be. No one knows what topics they're going to cover. No one knows what the style of the questions are going to be. We can make a pretty good guess, but we have no idea what the actual questions are going to be like. The other red flag that I see a lot is our programs guarantee you'll pass the exam. There's no guarantee for the JMSS entrance exam. It's a competitive exam, and every single year it gets harder to actually get in because there's more and more students that do it. I remember when I was doing the entrance exam, the year before, there were maybe like 500 kids. The year after, there were like 700, right? Now, what they do is actually have two batches of entrance exam like times. So they have one in the morning and then one in the afternoon, because that's how many people are trying to get into school now. So it gets more competitive every year. There's no program that can guarantee that you'll get in. Even I don't say when I'm tutoring, I don't say, oh yeah, you're guaranteed to get in, because it's up to how you perform. It's not up to me to specifically teach you the exact methods and stuff. I try my best, but I can't guarantee if you'll get in or not, right? So any company that says, oh, if you do X, Y, Z steps, you're guaranteed to get in, absolute scam, run away from them and try and find a different tutoring agency. Other red flags is the exam mainly focuses on scientific knowledge. No, scientific knowledge is a big component of it, but it's not the only thing that really matters, and it's definitely not the only thing that JMSS focuses on. There's a lot of critical thinking, problem solving, and communication skills that are done in the exam, and communication skills and passion are really tested in the interview. If you didn't know, JMSS also has an interview. The other red flag that I see is you only need to prepare for the exam. The interview doesn't matter as much. I actually believe the complete opposite. I think the interview matters more than the exam, because JMSS is a school that doesn't just care about test scores. They want students that are well-rounded. They want students that are academically talented as well as holistically talented. And talented is a very loosey-goosey term, but they want the best of the best. And if you have two students, one who has good academics and one who has good academics and also a good social life and other activities and hobbies, which one are you most likely to pick? The one with just good academics or the one with more? Probably the one with more, because that's a better student. So JMSS doesn't just care about your exam scores. They don't just care about your academics. They care about a holistic range of things. So it's important that you keep that in mind, especially when you're going to prepare for this entrance exam. JMSS only looks for students who score highest on tests. Absolutely not true. I've had a number of students that didn't really perform too well on the actual entrance exam. They got maybe 2 or 3 superiors, but they were still able to get in. Some of my friends who got into John Monash when I was in school as well, they only had 1 superior in science writing. So test scores don't really matter as much. It's helpful to have really good test scores, but the interview is the thing that really carries a lot more weight, just from my experience and what I've seen. So test scores aren't just the only thing that matters. If you just need to pass the test, that's all you need to really focus on, and then you can focus on doing a good interview. Here's what the school actually says about tutors and a bunch of different things. So in case you didn't believe any of the stuff that I talked about before, this is from the JMSS Information Night in 2024, so really recent. And you can have a listen to what they actually say. So let me mute myself on this so you can listen to it very clearly.
Question I will be answering here is, are there any practice tests available? That's the first question. How do you prepare for the academic components of the entry exam? Is the second question. So I will answer that by saying that the entry testing at John Monash is unique, and the tests are tailored for students who have an interest and passion in science, and in terms of degree of difficulty, it's nothing expected beyond a sort of a year 9 science level. There are some practice tests available from EduTest, but there won't be sort of any of the sample writing questions that we do, because each year the tests are individually written in order for every person applying to have an even playing field. So there's no ability for any students to be disadvantaged, and in fact the written tests will have multiple choices available for students to write about. And the assessments are designed in particular so that no one has any advantage over anyone else. And the other thing I'd like to mention, and it might be a little bit controversial, but none of the tutoring companies also know exactly what's going to be on an exam in a particular year, and so they won't have any idea what if they're preparing students for this test. You know, one of the things about this assessment is we want students to show their genuine interest and passion in science, and that's followed up with an interview afterwards. The next question that...
So there you have it. These are, I guess, some of the main talking points that I wanted to highlight. The entry testing at John Monash is unique, which is why you're watching this. The tests are tailored for students to have an interest and passion in science. These are the big things that John Monash really looks for. There won't be any of the sample writing questions that you do from EduTest. So if you're expecting that in the EduTest exam, tough luck, you're not going to get any, and it's really hard to find sample writing for John Monash. None of the tutoring companies know exactly what's going to be on the exam in a particular year. So if you have a tutoring company that promises, oh, we know the exact question styles and the topics and blah, blah, blah that are going to be on the exam, no, they don't. They're lying to you. Because even John Monash says that they don't know. And I can confirm this because every single year, there are a bunch of topics that no one really prepares for in the entrance exams. So it's very difficult to prepare for, which is why I enjoy preparing for John Monash the most, because it keeps me on my toes as well as a tutor. Moving on, this is what the actual exam structure looks like. And again, the specific structure may vary as the years go on. And so in 2025 and onwards, this might slightly vary. However, this is a very good overview of how you should go about preparing for it. It's very similar to the other selective school entrance exams in Victoria. So 60 questions, 30 minutes, whatever. However, there is slight differences. So there's this new aspect called science reasoning and science writing. Usually there's 2 science writings in the exam as well. So we'll just start right off the bat. Mathematics, stock standard, 60 questions in 30 minutes. So that's 30 seconds a question. Numerical reasoning, this might vary. It might be 50, it might be 55. Some years it's been 55, some years it's been 50, some years it's been 45. But usually it's 50 questions in 30 minutes, 25 minutes, around 30 to 36 seconds a question as well. Science reasoning, this is the new thing that no other entrance exam has other than Elizabeth Blackburn. Science reasoning, it's very tame in terms of the timing comparison. So 30 questions in 30 minutes, 60 seconds a question. Science writing, you usually end up getting 2 prompts for each writing. However, you only pick one. So I'm saying you only really have 1 question to answer. Usually you get 25 minutes to 30 minutes to write. So it's 1,800 seconds a question. This is just a funny little numeric. You don't need to care about it. Pretty much you get 30 minutes to write 1 essay. For most entrance exams, it is very important that you do perform above the expected time limits. So for example, for the numerical reasoning, trying to aim for around 25 seconds a question is one of the better things you can do. For science reasoning, trying to aim for 30 seconds a question is a good thing you can do. For science writing, trying to cut into half the time, so 15 to 20 minutes for an essay is one of the better things you can do. Why do I suggest this? It's because this is what most tutoring companies actually do. They actually cut the times in half for science writing and stuff. So they expect students to write a full science essay in 15 minutes. So if you want to be competitive, I would strongly suggest that you do aim for a 15-minute to 20-minute essay, because most other students are going to be preparing for that. So even though the exam is usually 30 minutes long for the science writing, it's important that you prepare for 15-minute writings, because that's what most students are going to be preparing for. And again, I want to emphasize this might change over years. So there might be some deviation, but this is the overall structure. This is what you can expect. EDU test does a really bad job of telling you what the topics are going to be. So I would suggest that you actually go on the EDU test website, and actually look at the John Monash Entrance Exam and see if there's any information about it. The John Monash website as well is a fantastic way to go about learning about what's going to be on the entrance exam. So what can you actually prepare for? Like I've been saying, you can't guarantee everything that'll be tested, but we can make some pretty good guesses and plans to prepare for the exam. So one thing I would suggest is preparing for the science communication understanding aspect of the science tests, your general mathematics abilities, as well as your interview strategies. And these 3 are basically the 3 pillars that I prepare my students for John Monash. So all of this goes hand in hand when I'm preparing, even though some students may not have an interview. I prepare for all of these things, which is why my students, if they get an interview, you're pretty much like good to get in. I don't want to say guaranteed, because obviously you're not guaranteed for anything, but every single student that I've had that has passed the exam has gotten an interview and was able to actually secure a spot in John Monash. There's been 2 students that weren't able to do that, and that was because they had second round interviews and it was really competitive and they unfortunately weren't able to get in. But these are the 3 pillars that I prepare for, and you should start preparing for these as well. This is the secret to John Monash and how to do well in John Monash. So science, communication, understanding, your general mathematics ability, as well as interview strategies. You need to prepare for all 3 of these things at the same time. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to get in. So in mathematics, what can you actually prepare for? Well, the maths component is very similar to other selective entry exams. So if you're familiar with those, you should be pretty good. More or less, it's just the stock standard syllabus content stuff, and they might go overextend a little bit. I know for 1 year in the selective school exams, they actually had logarithms on there, which is a topic that you don't cover until you're 10. So that was very strange for me as a tutor. And so I prepared my students for logarithms, and then the year after they didn't have that. So you can expect it to be on level, but a little bit higher. So my best advice is to grab a textbook and go through the fundamental questions and concepts in that textbook. Find a really good teacher or tutor. I'm not a fan of most tutoring companies, but find a very good conceptual teacher and tutor that can teach you difficult concepts in a good way. And then prepare with the EDU test format. So this means actually preparing for the 60 questions in 30 minutes exam style and getting familiar with what that looks like. There are a bunch of really helpful resources online, a bunch of free ones online these days because there's been an influx in tutoring companies, and a lot of them just publish a bunch of free resources. Some of them are terrible, so just keep that in mind. But this is the best way to actually prepare for it, and this is more or less what I teach as well. So I tell students, hey, you need to understand the core concepts behind the math. You need to find a good conceptual baseline, and then you just start preparing for the exam through the questions and the question styles that you do. So this is really the core in how you go about preparing for the mathematics components. The science components is, in my opinion, the most important section in the exam because it's a science school. This is how they differentiate things. And I've had a bunch of students who didn't do too well in the maths components, but they did really well in science, end up getting an interview. On the flip side, I've had a bunch of students who did well in maths, but they didn't do too well in science and they didn't get an interview, right? So I had the 4 students that weren't able to get interviews, didn't do well in maths. Didn't do well in science. So a lot of the exam does come down to science. So it's important that you grab a textbook and learn the concepts about different fields in science and take really good notes on different fields in science. You should be consistently reading and learning about the topics that you find interesting. It's about science passion. If you're passionate about a certain topic and you find interest in a certain topic, learning more about it is better for you because you're more likely to remember it and you're more likely to enjoy preparing for it. Then this is the big thing. You can prepare for the exam by going through ICAS science papers. ICAS science papers is the one that I recommend for all students because it is the most similar to the John Monash Entrance Exam. Not exactly, but it's the most similar. So the reason I say most similar is because, like John Monash said, the exam is structured and made in a way that it allows for students to all be on an even playing field. ICAS Science does a really good job at this, in my opinion, because what they do is they actually have the content within the question itself. And this is what John Monash does as well. They have some of the content that you should have known or need to know to answer the question within the question stem itself. So it's about critical thinking, it's about problem solving, and using information that you're given as well as other knowledge. You should be able to create educated guesses, right? ICAS is one of the best things you can do for this. So if you can, get a hold of some ICAS science papers and go through that. Other exams like the big science exams and stuff are also really good. However, they require a lot of external knowledge. So I usually leave that to the end of the preparation phase. Now, here's some advice as a tutor that has tutored a bunch of students over the last couple of years, and some of the more controversial hot takes, I guess, about different tutoring companies and agencies. So the first thing I would say is you should be getting feedback on the writing aspect as often as possible. So every single week you should try and do a science writing essay and get feedback from it every single week. The other thing I would suggest is that you read science articles at least once a week. So you are up to date with different news things and stuff like that. It might not be helpful for the actual written component in the exam, but for the interview, it's going to be fantastic if you know a bunch of things about science. You should be maintaining other hobbies and also maintaining your current academic level at school. If you get an interview and your teachers notice that you don't have good academic scores and you get that in your report card for semester 1, you have to go into the interview with that, right? That's not going to be too good for you if you have a measly, feeble report card, which shows that you've clearly like dipped in academics since you've been preparing for your John Monash exam. And if you drop all your other hobbies like sports, music, volunteering, and stuff like that, then that's not going to be too good for you either, right? So trying to maintain all these things whilst you're preparing is one of the best things you can do as a student to get into John Monash. It's also better for you in the preparation phase as well. You won't be as stressed and you will be more likely to enjoy the preparation process. Most of my students actually enjoy John Monash preparation because it becomes fun after you get the hang of it, and it becomes really enjoyable. And I love teaching it as well because it is something that you gain more passion and interest for it as you go. Here's a big thing. Group classes don't work for a bunch of students. So you might be thinking, okay, yeah, that kind of, that kind of makes sense, but also doesn't. If group classes don't work, then why are they so popular? The reason why they're so popular is because most tutoring companies really enjoy getting a bunch of money per hour for a short amount of time. So let's say you have 10 students. If you're doing proper one-on-one tuition, you might be charging 50 to 60 bucks an hour. Let's just say $60 an hour, right? So you might be charging $60 an hour. For those 10 students, you might be doing 10 hours a week. So that's $600, right? But you have to allocate 10 hours a week for that. On the other hand, if you charge $15 an hour for 10 people in 1 2-hour group class, you can make $300, right? In those 2 hours. And then you have the other 8 hours to do whatever you want. So you can have another group class if you wanted to. So most tutors really push the idea of a group class. I'll be honest, I've done a bunch of group classes for a lot of students for selective entrance exams, and John Monash especially. They don't work, which is why I don't offer them anymore. They simply just do not provide enough benefit for the student, and every student has their own unique trajectory when it comes to the John Monash entrance exam. So I would suggest, if you are tossing up between a one-on-one tutor and a group class tutor, try and go for a one-on-one tutor that has benefit, because most group classes just won't work for the John Monash entrance exam. They work for some components of it, like mathematics concepts and stuff. It's really good. But in general, if you're only really going for a group class, it doesn't work. Try and get a one-on-one tutor in there as well, and a good one-on-one tutor as well. You should pay more attention to science if you can, because from my experience, science is weighted slightly more than the maths components, because everyone can be good at math. Not many people can actually be good at science. John Monash is very secretive about their science exams. So if you can, pay more attention to science, try and smash out the science entrance exam as much as you can, because it is very helpful, and it does help kind of improve your scores. Be genuinely passionate about science. If you're doing this exam, it's expected that you're interested in science and are a nerd, basically, because if you're not interested in science and you're only doing it because your parents are telling you to do it, you probably won't enjoy the process. So being genuinely passionate, interested about science is one of the best things you can do. All my students who got in successfully, they maybe weren't the most passionate at the start, but at the end of it, they were super passionate about science, and they realized that they wanted to do something in STEM. John Monash publishes, I think they say like 90% of their students do a STEM field after they graduate from JMSS. So doing a STEM field and being interested in science is one of the best things you can do. The last tip of advice is prepare for maths early and keep consistent with it. Even though I say pay more attention to science, preparing for maths is one of the best things you can do. Start early, keep consistent. If you learn quadratics at the start of the year, and then you don't touch it for about 2 months, and you come back halfway through and you go, oh, I don't remember any of this, that's not a good look. So keep consistent with mathematics as you go across, and maintain that level of consistency as you kind of work towards the John Monash exam. Now, where to from here? Start your preparation early. If you can, the earlier the better. The more time you have to refine your skills, the better your scores will be, and the better your preparation period will be. Break down your preparation into more manageable sections. So you've gone through kind of the overall outlook of what the exam is going to be. Try and break it down into more manageable bite-sized sections and see what you can do week by week. I'll be uploading another video on how to actually go about scheduling as well a little bit later. Staying consistent is one of the best things you can do. So every single week, if you can set aside some dedicated time to practice and prepare, I would suggest once every 2 days, you should be allocating some time for the JMSS entrance exam on top of your other hobbies and commitments. that's my recommendation. You don't have to stick with it. If you wanted to, you can block out an entire day on a Saturday or a Sunday to tutor and learn about JMSS. But I would suggest a little bit of time every single week and consistently focus on your weaker areas to have rapid improvement. So a lot of my better students that got good really quickly, they really struck in the areas that they were weak in, and they focused on that for a couple of weeks, and they got really, really good, and they got better test scores in the mock exams and stuff. So stay consistent and focus on the weaker areas. Get consistent and regular feedback, especially in your written responses. We've already talked about this. Getting feedback as often as you can is one of the best things you can do as a student, regardless of what topic you're going to be doing and regardless of what exam you're preparing for. Getting feedback is one of the better things you can do. Make sure you consider interview preparation, especially if you feel confident about your exams. Start preparing for your interview early. So focus on communicating your passion for science, as well as understanding different aspects of the interview that you should be aware of, and learning how to communicate the different things that you learn from books and stuff and articles when you're interviewing in an organic way. Last bit of advice is try and stay motivated. Success comes from persistence. So if you keep, hitting your head against the desk and you're like crying over your exams, try not to. Stay motivated. Don't feel pressured by the weeks that you really struggle in, because even I had that, and most of my students have some weeks where our test scores are abysmal, right? When you are consistently working, it might be a bunch of different things where you just start getting a little bit tired and burnt out. Don't worry about it. It happens to the best of students and the worst of students. Don't feel pressured by the harder weeks and the tougher weeks. Just keep pushing through, stay consistent, and stay on track. And if you can keep that consistency up, you will be in a pretty good position. Anyway, that's really all I have for this video. Hopefully that helps you out a little bit in terms of what to prepare for in John Monash. I will be uploading a couple more in-depth videos on what to do. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comment sections. But there's not really much else I think I need to cover. I think I covered the main basis of it. Hopefully that helped you out. The goal of this video was to basically just give you an overview of what John Monash is looking for and clear up any misinformation about different tutoring companies and how to prepare for it. So hopefully it helped. That's really all there is for me to talk about. I don't think I've skipped anything. I think I went over everything pretty thoroughly. If you have any questions, leave it in the comments. I'll be more than happy to make another video about it. But yeah, that's it. That's the video. Don't like, don't comment, don't sub. Just log off and do something else now. See ya.